Hi, I'm Chloe, and I'm the Vice President of House of Codes. And today I will be teaching the second lesson for beginning Python. First of all, thank you everyone for coming to our class, and I hope you guys learn from it. And then I believe the first class already give you some kind of basics about Python, and today we'll go deeper, especially focusing on lists and functions in Python. So first, I would hope that you guys can use the website Replit so that you guys can actually code on yourself and then run the program to check whether you make it work or not. So it is www.replit.com, which I will be posting in the chat. And then you guys can log in with Google, or you already have an account, you can just log in. And you can open your own Replit and REPL, so you can go with me and code when I ask you guys to do some like challenges or practices. It's always a better way of learning. So now we'll start. So first of all, we're going to review some of the concepts from last week. So starting with comments. Comments are separated with two ways. First is the single line ones and then multi-line ones. You can add anything you want here just to maybe explain your code or add a note to your partner. But these, whatever you write in your comments will not being run by the program. So just it's always helpful to add a comment when you want to make your results organized. And then there are easy functions such as print functions, which you can type here and it will display on your screen. So basically printing out what you wanted to do. And then also another very important one is the input function, which we all know that in websites, it is connection between us and the program. So our inputs are also important, and they are collected here through the input functions. And now there are, you can see math operations. They are just very similar to math, but with different like signs. So the multiplication is this like a star instead of like a cross, but it's very similar to math. And also the equal one is one of the most common thing I would say in Python you will use, because it is not equal in math. So it is not the equal in math, but it is very important because you can set a variable. For example, a is a variable here, and it's set with the integer 5. However, instead of this, you can name it anything. You can name it like your name or whatever you want it to represent. And here you can have, instead of an integer, you can also do like a string or like a float. But how do you represent equality, the mass equality here? You need to use, it's not say type in here, but just FYI, if you want to show equality, do 2 equal signs. And then here are, you're actually coding, and it has like logic inside it. First, there are if statements, which just like English, if something, then you do something. So the condition here, what you're typing to, for example, like a is equal to 5, then you execute the code segment below it. This is the most basic if statement. So only if it's true, if the condition is true, then it will run the program. Otherwise, it will just ignore this altogether and go on to later codes. There's also sometimes that if statement also follows an else statement or else function, that if it doesn't fit with the condition, then you also execute a code, but a different code instead, like the code B, which different from the first one. The first one, if it doesn't fit, it just ignores it, but the second one, it still has to execute something. And the last one about if statements is the else if or elif. It's just a abbreviation for else if. So for this, for example, this code, it means if the condition 1 is fit, then execute code A. But if it doesn't, it goes on to the else if. So else condition 1, but also if 2. So if it fits the condition 2, then it will execute code B, and so on. And for if it doesn't fit 1, 2, or 3, then it will execute code D. So these are just the basic logics for Python, and it's very important later because in a lot of times your codes are about this kind of choice, like which codes to execute. And also there are logical operations, or you call Boolean values, to show if the statement is true or false. So there are basically two different operations, is the AND operations and OR operations. So AND, what it basically means is that both A and B has to be true in order for it to be true. So, but for OR, it is different because it means only one of them has to be true. So the only differences between them is for one of them is true and one of them is not. Because if them are both true, then and no matter it's and or, it's all true, and it's all false, then it's all false. But if one of them is true, one of them is false, then you have to be careful on if it's and or. So yeah, now I think it covers what basically being taught last week. I know we covered a lot of materials, so we'll also do some other reviews as we go on, and you will definitely use some of the knowledge from last week. Is there any, if you have any questions about last week, you feel free to ask in the chat, and me or our president, Frank, will answer your question. So now let's get started. So the first thing I'll cover here is the list in Python. Lists are, first of all, a very strong and powerful tool here in Python, since it's able to store a lot of information in only one variable. So as we learned before, we can use this equal signs to create a variable. For example, here, classmate 1 is equal to Andy. But however, it's only storing one piece of data, which is the string Andy. But as you can see that there are many different classmates, and if you have to create each variable for one of them, then it's going to take up many lines and many spaces to store. It's very inconvenient to use. So I think coding is not only we making the code work, but we also want to shorten it and make it easier to read, easier to write, and take up less space. So there's the tool list, so we can only create one variable to store all of this information. So here, this is the list classmates, which contains the 4 classmates here. And they're all in one list: Andy, Brown, Connor, and Delta. So you can create a list by still using the equal sign, but however, you add this square brackets and use commas in between each one of the variables. Well, one list can take up unlimited number of variables, so 4 is not its limit. Some of the greatest lists, like the websites, the list can be very, very long, and it's very useful because if it's, for example, 1,000 variables, it can still be stored in one list. And now there are some more examples. So this is a list only containing strings, but we can also we can have integers, floats, or Boolean values contained in the list too. And the datas in the list have very little rules, so there can be many different possibilities. For example, the variables can be repeated. For example, here the list can have 2 10s, 2 20s, and 2 30s. This is supposed to be ND, but it just means it can be repeated. And also it can be all in different data types. So like this is a string, this is integer, all that. So this free characteristics also is another reason why you should use a list. So you can connect everything together. And the list itself also contains a lot of functions and commands you can use to play with or like manipulate the list to make it change like throughout the program and when it runs. So here are some of the useful ones. So the first one is append, which is inserting a new item at the end of the list. It can be used just to append, and then you can just call it, and then the format should be like this: list, and then append, and then you put in here. So for example, this, after you run this function, yeah. So you can say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is the original list, and then you append Thursday, it adds Thursday at the end of the list. So now there's your new list. And then other than adding, you can also remove an item from the list. So, so it's kind of similar. You just say remove, and then you say what is variable you want to remove. For example, here you want to remove Wednesday. And you can see the list only contains Monday and Tuesday here. And these changes will be saved, and then after you access the list later, it will be in a new form. Now we have our first practice, which is creating a list with 5 months names, like January, February, any months you like. And then after you create that list, you later install a new month at the end of the list and then remove one of them. So I will be giving some time for you guys to try, and then I will be typing out the solutions later. Remember, if your solution does not match with mine, it doesn't mean you are wrong. In coding, there's always different ways to solve the same problem. But you guys can check your way solution by running the code, so see if it fits what you want to do. So yeah, let's try it. Okay, now I hope everyone are done. I'm gonna type in on my screen about my way of doing it. But still, if you have a different solution or different question, type in the chat so we can take a look at it as well. So first we create the list with 5 months. I just choose the first 5 months. Right. Yeah, remember, don't type in the comment one. I just made a very common but lethal mistake. So January, you can definitely come up with a different list. So after you create the list, we do our first challenge, first part of the question, which is insert a new month at the end of the list. This we can use the command statement we just learned before. So I'll do it right now. Months, which is the list name, dot append, and then we add June. And then we have to remove the first item. So the first item we can see is January. So we still months dot remove, the remove command, and then the variable name. No, not variable, like yeah, the one you want to delete, the data you want to delete, January. And then remember to check if it works, you have to print out the list, because if you don't, even though the changes are made, it will not print out, so you cannot see anything. So here we have February, March, April, May, and June. So you can see our month is added in the end, June is added, and January is deleted. So this is a successful program. So yeah, let's go on. But other than adding stuff and deleting stuff from the list, we still need to make those data here stored useful. So how do we access it? We know that if we create a single variable, single data variable, how we access it by just calling its name. But for the lists, we probably only need to use one single piece of data it stores there. So we cannot just simply use the list name. We also need to use something called index values. So index values, or index numbers we say here, whatever you call it, it's numbers that are representing the piece of data. So we have to remember very clearly is that index always starts with 0. So here the data ND has index of 0, and it goes one by one, integers going up. So 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, like that. After, if it's a long list, it still goes like this. It starts with zeros and counting up. How do you access a single one of them? Is by typing the list name in the square bracket and the index number. So here, print classmates square bracket 0, which means that you want to print the index 0's value in the list classmates. Yeah, so here you can see it prints ND, which is index 0. Instead of only printing, this can also be used in different ways. You can use classmate, for example, classmate 0. You can compare it with another variable or another data. It's just a way of you getting a piece of data from the list. It is very useful and not only printing. And then also, index number can be negative. So when index number is negative, it will be counting backward from the list. Instead of starting from the first one, like Andy, it will start from delta in this list. But it did not start from 0 if it's going backward. It's starting from -1. So here, delta has the index value of counting forward 3, but also -1. So you can print -1 and -2, which are delta and Connor, the very last variable and the second to last one. So why is this useful? There might be very long lists that it's expanding every day or expanding every time you run the program, that it's very hard to know the total number of total number of data stored in there. So if you want to access like always the last data, or second to last, third to last, maybe it's hard for you to get what is the index counting forward, but you can definitely know the index counting backward. So here you can definitely use this negative index. It can be very a lot easier for you. So here comes our second challenge. It is, first you create a list using all the even numbers from 1 to 20, and then you print out the seventh item from the list by using index. So yeah, still the same. I will give you guys a few minutes to try, and then I will post the solutions here. Yeah, good luck. Okay, I hope everyone are done. I'm gonna start. So first, still we create a list. Even numbers from 1 to 20. Here we use integers to represent. I will just use integers. So yeah, here are all the even numbers. Now we gonna print whatever the number is on the 7th item using index. But remember, our 7th item, it is, you count, it is 14. But how do you use index to find it? The index starts from 0, so you always need to know that R7 is the 6th index because there's a 0. So we print the list name and with 6. You run it, get to 14, so the 7th number. So this is a question, it's kind of tricky because a lot of people just forget it starts from 0 and just put 7 in, but that is definitely wrong because that prints the 8th number. It is dealing with lists is the index is everyone make mistakes on it, but just try to be careful and get used to starting from 0, that kind of idea. And now here we go to you can print out like multiple items together, which is you have an index range. It is similar for the for loop. It starts with the included number and it ends in exclusively. So here's an example. So 2,6 is the range 2 to 6, but it include the 2, but it exclude the 6. So actually what contains here is 2, 3, 4, 5, not 6. And then here's a different example. But different than this, different than the for loop, we always use the square brackets and we separate them from a column. Like here, it's kind of like the ratio in math. Like I always think about that, but 0 to 3. So this actually means that you print this classmate's index from 0 to 3, which is index 0, 1, and 2. Let us see. So yeah, Andy with index 0, Brown with index 1, and Connor with index 2. There's index 3 is not printed, delta is not printed. So here we have another challenge. This one is the harder one, which you have to use both the range way of printing and also the negative index. So try to combine the two ways or two like knowledges we have taught, and then try to code here together. And I'll give a little bit more time for this, and yeah, good luck. And if you have questions, just ask. Okay, I hope you guys are done. If not, at least have tried and thought about it. So here I'm gonna start. First, also just create the list. I can just copy it from here. And now we need the 6th to 8th from the list. And we have to use the negative index. So I'll write my print statement first. The tricky part is figuring out what is the negative index for the 6th and 8th number. So here we can see the 6th number is 12 and the 8th is 16. But so you can just come backward. This is -1, -2, and here's -3. So for 16, it is -3, and then -4, -5. For 12, it is -5. So the range, you have to remember that you exclude the last number, so you cannot just write -3 for 16, because if you write -16, -3 here, then you'll actually exclude the 16 or the index of -3. So you have to go one more, which is -2. Here, what it means is -5, here 12 to -2, but excluded it. So -12 to -16, 12 to 16. And all the values here. Let's see. Yeah, those are the numbers we wanted. There's also problems. So what if you write -2 to -5? It will print an empty list, because every time you have to run here that it has to be the more negative or the less index to the higher index. Yes, -5. 5 is greater than 2, but -5 is smaller than -2. So you always write the smaller number first. Even though when you count negative indexes counting backward, you still write the forward way, kind of. So this is very kind of a really challenging one. And if you get it right, then it's very you're very good at this, because you can see here you have to deal with the new thing, negative index, and you have to remember what to exclude, and then also you have to write in the correct direction. So I think it's a very good practice. So yeah, let's keep going. Also, we have some more functions that we can manipulate the list. First is change a specific item to a different one. First of all, you have to, it's more like defining a variable, but instead of a variable, you kind of write the list name here, and then you add the index. So classmates 0, and you said it was Edwin. And then classmates index 3, you said it was Franklin. Even though at first it's not, it's changing the index 0 and index 3. After you make these two commands, they will replace Andy with Edwin and Delta with Franklin. So yeah, let's run it here and see. So indeed, the changes have been made. So throughout the program, your data you need might change. So you can simply use this kind of way to make sure your data is always valid and helpful for you. So let's see. There are also, you can change multiple variables at the same time, just like we are able to print out multiple variables at the same time with this kind of range notation. So here, if you want to change multiple items, you just write the range. So the range is index 2 to index 4. And you want to change it to black and white. So it means index 2 and 3 are changing. Remember, 4 is excluded. The last number is excluded. And you change it with black and white. So let's see. Indeed, they are changed. The blues change to black and yellow change to white. Others stays the same. So here are also different situation which you might add it 2 different variables, but also one index is changed. It will still add the additional variable, and there will just be more piece of data. So here you can see the range is 2 to 3. 3 is excluded, so only index 2 is being changed, which is blue. But only one piece of data, but here you have black and white. What does it do is it just add in another variable. So instead of red, green, blue, yellow, and purple, it will change to, let's see, red, green, black, white, yellow, purple. So you can see here, the blue is being replaced with basically black and white, but they're all separate datas. And you can see here, there's 5 pieces of data and there's 6. So you can also do it that way by replacing one piece of data with 2 or more. And if the inputted item are less, it will also move accordingly as well. So it's very free. You can see your range is 1 to 4. So there's these 3, green, blue, and yellow are changing, but it changed only to black and white. So you can see these 3 are being replaced by these 2. So now you only have 4 pieces of data: red, black, white, and purple. So as you can see that from here, it saves you from, if you have a big chunk of data you want to change, and you don't want to use single like remove functions, because it might take a lot, like it might take like 20 remove commands. But this way, it's very easy for you to use, especially when you want to like, you also, instead of removing them, or you want to just combine them or delete some of them, or make it to the newest data you want to store, then it is very, very helpful, because the range can be very, very big. So now we can see that now we have a different functions we can learn, which is insert. The first one we talk about is replacing. So some of the data have to be changed. So you can see here, there's no longer green, blue, and yellow. But what if we want to keep those and we want to add in 2 more? Instead of the append, which added in the end, we now can choose our own index number, so we can add in wherever we want to be in the list. So how do we make this command? List name dot insert. Now you can probably see that most of the commands start with list name, a dot, and then whatever command it is, and then you input some information about the changes you want to make or operations you want to do. So it's very similar. It helps you to remember all of them. You basically have to remember the name of the command, and it's very similar to English, like inserting something. So yeah, let's go on. So if we want to insert color black in between blue and yellow, so what we can do, so we have to first see where blue and yellow is. So blue is here, yellow is here. You want to add in between. So the most tricky part here is to determine what index value you will make your new variable, your new data. Like, for example, here, it is 3 because 0, 1, 2, you add in between, it becomes the new 3. So it should be the index number of the item after it's inserted. So 2 and then 3, it should be after it. So determine the index, remember, starts from 0, and getting the right number helps you do whatever the right thing you wanted to do. So here you can see black is added and it's between blue and yellow. So now we have a new practice, or you can call challenge, which is you create your own list of 5 colors and you insert another color between the first and second item, and then change the last 2 colors to colors that you dislike. So I will still give you guys some time to try. Yeah, let's get started. Yeah. Now I'll get started with mind solution. Let's first create our color list. I choose my own a few colors, just it definitely can be different. So here are my list of colors. So now my first job to do is insert another color between the first and the second item. So we use our insert command, color, the list name, dot insert. And now we have to figure out what index we have to insert. So remember, red is index 0, so the one after it is index 1. I'm gonna add index 1. Here I'll add the color orange. And now I have to change 2 colors to the colors that I don't like. It's very weird. I don't know how I come up with the color I don't like, but anyway, here I choose the color I like. So now it is the list name, the index. What about changing index like 3 silver to like, I don't know, pink. Let's go. And 2 to brown. And remember to check your answers. You have to print the list. Otherwise it won't print itself. So print color. Okay. Oh, yeah. Anyway, so first you see orange is added in the index 1 here. And I remember I said replacing silver, but actually I was wrong because after orange is added, index 3 is purple. So purple is changed to, sorry, I did not consider that when I talk about it, but it is the right thing. Number 3 index is, after you add orange, it is purple and it was changed to pink. And then number 2 index, instead of, it was after orange, which is green, and it was changed to brown. So this shows the correct answer for it. And now we'll take about a 5-minute break. I noticed that we already passed through the first half of the class. So take this 5 minutes to maybe relax or think about what you have learned, and we'll see you after that. Okay, 5 minutes is up and we'll continue our lessons. Yeah, so the last part about lists. So here we also have more commands and more ways of manipulating the list, but almost there. So first, we have another different command is pop. It is very similar, but also different with remove, because the remove function, we input what the data is stored in the list, the one we want to remove. However, and sometimes we have no idea what data is in there, but we know which index we're gonna want to remove. So we can then use the pop command, which you input the index number. So list name dot pop and then index number. So here there's a list of colors, and then you want to pop index number 3, which is yellow. Let's see. So yellow are gone, only other 4 colors are staying. And then, yeah, let's go on. Sometimes we have to reset the list as your code or your program goes on. Instead of deleting each one of them, just use clear. It just clears the list for you. And maybe later you can add more stuff in it. There's still list colors. So instead of deleting the completely the list, but just clears the data in it. And now here are a bit more of the challenging part. So it's more about loops, which we covered from last week, I believe. And through the loop, you have a certain condition for it to keep looping, for it to keep going through the code. And once it does not fit with the conditions, then it stops. So how can we use loops with lists and help to achieve more like more of the stuff we can do? So here we use the there's the part of the code is we have a list, and what we wish to do is to print out all the items in the list separately. So here what I want to do is print out it separately, but how can I do that? If you have to write like 5 commands of printing index 0, index 1, 2, 3, 4, that will be too much of a work. So how can I do it with only 2 lines of code? It is using a for loop. So what is the for loop? It is basically your conditions are for I in range. It basically means when I is in a certain range. The range is the same as what we learned before, like from index 2 to 4, that kind of range. So for I in range, length of colors, which is the length of this list, means that the number of loops you go through has to be in the range of 0, and then the number you put in here. So the length of the colors, which is 5. So what it basically means is loop the code here for when loop here for 5 times. But what actually do is you set I to 0 at first. And then each time you add 1 when it loops, and when it's equal to the number here 5, it stops. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 is 5 times. That's how it works, and that's how you're able to achieve printing out each one of it. So it's hard to, it's kind of a little complicated at the beginning, but what you can just imagine, the number you input here is how many times it will loop. And then every time it loops, it prints the one with the corresponding index. It starts with 0, so it actually fits the index idea. So the first time I is equal to 0, and then you print red, and then until it equals to 4. I hope it's kind of clear that I is a variable you create here. So the variables start from 0, and every time it adds 1, it in a range of 5, so it cannot be equal to 5. 5 is excluded as in a range. That's how the loop works. So as you can just see, the length give you how many items is in the list. So that's basically how you done it. It's a very, even though there's no like printing out the whole list command directly, but this way of doing it is very common, and it's very short no matter how long the list is. So remember it, or you don't have to remember it like remembering it, but it should be very clear logic that you use every time. Yeah, so here as I write, repeat the print statement based on how many items, and print out item with index of 1 to I. Wait, actually 0 to I. So start with 0. Sorry, this is a typo. But yeah, I hope it works. What I explained, and it's a very tricky part. So just ask questions, and I'll do my best to explain for you. And also, there's another way of looping it, which is the for each loop. The for each loop is written like this. So for x, like for each item in the list, in the list name, and then print the x. So yeah, how it translates is for each item x inside the list, you print out the x. So there's an example for the list of colors. For all, like you can say for all colors, but you don't write all in here. For like 4 colors just means for all of the items. For the colors in the colors. For, you know, it's not much of a grammar, but you can definitely understand what it means. And then you print color. So every time, for every variable in this list, you go through the loop. How many variables, how many times you go through. It kind of tests or take in each one of it one by one until there's no more items. You can see it's printed separately in the right order. So there's just 2 different ways of you accessing the list and printing out them separately. So as you can see, all of this stuff can be done. You writing maybe like print command one by one, but using loops is always helpful in shortening your program. And so that's why it's important we kind of get that kind of logic. So now we have a challenge. So now we have also the all even numbers from 1 to 20. And then we'd like to change the list to all the odd numbers from 1 to 20, like using a loop or a for loop or for each loop. I hope that you guys maybe can try it first, and I'll explain it again as I go through, because I definitely know that it takes me a long time to get this, but I feel that for you guys to think it on your own is a very good opportunity. So yeah, let's try. I'll give you enough time, definitely. Okay, now I'll be starting explaining the solution for this challenge. Today I'll be only explaining the for loop way of solving it, since I still need to cover some function knowledge, but feel free to just consider about the for each loop solution, and we will probably cover it next class. Yeah, I apologize for that, but yeah, now let's go. So first of all is all the even numbers. So here we are, and we're going to use a for loop. And how many times we need to repeat for changing all of the numbers into the odd numbers is we have to move all of the items. So how many times I repeat is the length of the list. So for I in range, length of numbers. And then, so how do we actually change from the even to odd? So there are two ways. We can add one for each of the items, and we can subtract one for each of the items. So here we should choose subtract one, because if you add one, it's going to be 22, which exceed the range of 1 to 20. So we are going to subtract one for each items. So, well, now we're going to use the knowledge for changing a value for specific index. Index, we choose one, the I, because I starts from 0 and goes to the length of the list. So it would change starting from index 1. I, and then you minus 1 for each one of it. And then you print the list to check. Now you can see there's all of the odd numbers from 1 to 20. Again, for each loop answer, I'll be explaining. No, actually, my the other vice president, Clara, will be explaining it for you. Now we are starting a little bit of function basics. First, we might be very familiar with the word function, like in math, but in Python, what is it? So it is basically a blocks of code that only runs when you call it. And then already Python, there's a lot of functions that it prepares for you, like what we have learned in lists, like all those commands, remove and insert, for example. But we can also create and define our own functions. So when we want to define a function, and we basically use the def keyword, which represent define. And then later you can name your function by typing the name, and then some of the functions has input, which you can also create an input variable, but if you don't, just make it an empty input. And then remember, you need a colon, and then you start printing out the stuff you want to put in for your function. So here is very similar, like very simple function we are going to define, which is called my function. It has no input, and the code inside it is print example of a function. But you can see there's nothing printed out or nothing being run. Why does it happen? Because the code will only be run when you call the function. So here you call the function by typing the function name, and then make the necessary input. But here you don't have anything, so just leave it empty. After you run it, the code inside the function are run, so it's printed. Now we have a basic practice, which is just create a function that prints out your name, and then you have to call it. So it is very similar to this top one. So I'll just skip this function practice. So let's keep going on. So there's also other functions that really requires you to put a variable in, deliver a variable in, so that you can access the function. So for example, this one, you want to print out whatever you input from the function and you add 1. So you cannot make an empty input, because what do you add to 1? So here, when you call the function, you type add 1, and then you input a number, for example, like 8, and you will print the output. So let's see another example. Actually the same example, but with some like actual calls. So you can see if you inputted 10 in this add 1 function, then it will return you 11, which is 10 plus 1, and same for 25 and 71. And also be careful that what you make here to input, because if you don't input or input too much, then this function will not work and will just be an error. So here at 1 requires you to input a number, but the call does not. It will show an error until you have to miss a required argument. Like it will tell you you cannot do it that way, because that's not how the function is created, and that's not how you use it. And here is another time you input 2 numbers and still it won't work. So now we have the last challenge, which is just change it to printing your name that actually you have an input. So instead of just making an empty input and just a print, like your name, for example, like print Chloe, no, but actually you have to pass in your name if, like, when you call it. It's only 3 minutes left, but I'll give you like 2 minutes, and now I will explain it in the last 1 minute. But it wasn't supposed to be too challenging. It's just the beginning of functions, and we'll continue this topic next week. Yeah, just do a quick try. Okay, I will be starting right now. And if you did not finish, yeah, if you have just the idea of how you're gonna approach it, that will be enough. So I will define my function as name, and then my input is my name. And the code inside it is print my name, which is printing the name I inputted when I call it. So I'm gonna call it with 3. And then my name is printed, but you can see it's different than just an empty input with just print the string of Chloe. And lastly, I just want to explain why we are learning functions, because many will say that it is similar for just writing codes, and it's why do we create a function and then we have to call it and all that? Because sometimes a piece of code we have to use it multiple times, and then we just don't want to write it over and over again, and we can just pass in multiple different variables for different times, and we can access the code over and over again. So coding is a lot about saving spaces. I think I mentioned it a lot of times, but it's not only you make it work, but also you make it work efficiently. And now I know we just started about functions, but you can know functions can incorporate all of the commands, the loops we covered before. So it's definitely very useful. And yeah, class is over, and thank you for all of you guys to join me for this class. And I really hope my lesson helped you guys. And I hope next week you will still come here and enjoy the learning of Python. And even beyond our 3 weeks of teaching, you can still try to learn more Python or coding or computer science on your own, because it really benefits you. Yeah, thank you and have a great day. Bye.